course, the building has changed, I would say dramatically. The area where the offices are, part of that was the registration counter, and the principal had a very small office back just as you come in the door. This side of the hall, the dean of girls had a small office in that corner, and then the bookstore, which was a narrow room also. So that wall has been taken out, and that's different. As you come in the front door, there were probably 4 doors to get to those off. This area was the business typing area. The typewriters and so forth were in that area. The National Honor Society I was in a couple of years. I was in the band a couple of years. I was on the football team 3 years. I went to Boys State my junior year, which is a government program to teach kids government and how it works. And that was an honor to go. They select students in their junior year, and they go up to, it was in Flagstaff. So Boys State, I was in several dramatic productions. I was in speech contests. We had speech competitions. I was born in Phoenix, February 8th, 1936. My parents had an apartment at 1229 and a half East Adams, and that was the area I grew up in. That's my mother's side of the family came in 1903. My great-grandmother was a cook for a white family, and they came to Arizona, and I think she must have been about 18 years old. And so her parents, my great-great-grandparents, and her brother followed her to Phoenix. No. They had been living in Little Rock, Arkansas. My grandmother and her sisters, there were 10 children, 6 girls and 4 boys. My great-grandfather was Native American, and so therefore never a slave. Had a farm in Texas, large farm, had properties in various places. And 5 of the girls, 5 out of 6, went to college in the late 1800s, early 1900s. My grandmother went to Mary Allen College in Crockett, Texas, which was developed by the Presbyterian women, and the college burned down. It was a 3-story building in Crockett, Texas. The building caught fire. It was a wood structure, and my grandmother told the stories of how growing up on a farm, she kept her clothes and everything in her trunk neat. So when the fire started, she closed her trunk, threw it out the window, and slid down the banisters through the fire. And the fact that she was a farm girl, she didn't get rattled. But the city girls were running around screaming and not thinking, and did not get their clothes out. And so she had to loan a lot of them clothes to go home. She told of one of her brothers coming to pick her up. After that, she went to Prairie View College, where the sister closest to her in age was valedictorian in 1911. My grandmother finished in 1914. Of course, they were school teachers because that's what black folks could do back then, get jobs. And her brothers were teasing her because my grandfather dropped out of elementary school to work and take care of his mother and his sister. And so I think my grandfather went to 4th grade. And her brothers didn't want her to marry an uneducated man. And she was kind of the apple of her father's eye. And he said, "Do you love him?" And she said, "Yes." He said, "Well, go ahead and marry him." And that was how they came. My grandfather was, I don't know if we should put this on tape, but was 3 years younger. And so he changed his date of birth so that she would not be embarrassed that she married a younger man. They came to Phoenix in 1925. She wanted better opportunities for her children and better education. The thing that stands out to me was that you hear this saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that's the way it was in the black community. Because of segregated housing, blacks were confined to primarily 2 neighborhoods in Phoenix. The east side, from about 2nd Street to maybe 18th Street, south of Van Buren, deeds had restrictive covenants that prohibited blacks from owning property north of Van Buren, and they could not rent north of Van Buren. So the east side and then the west side from about 3rd Avenue to maybe 17th Avenue, south of Grant Street, between Grant and maybe what is now the I-10 freeway, were those neighborhoods, and you had to live there. And restrictive covenants in deeds did not end until probably 1967. And I remember a few of our families, we moved to Tempe, and there were elders in the community said, "Oh, you should not move out of the neighborhoods where blacks had lived. Your children will have problems," and that kind of thing. And I remember indicating to my children, first of all, I asked them if they wanted to move. And second, I admonished them that they had to make good grades, that they would have difficulties with microaggressions, they would have to defend themselves, and that they had to participate in school activities. And they were all for it. There were a few incidents of racism that they had to deal with, but I think they did very well. And all of them graduated from McClintock High School in Tempe, and did well, I think, in terms of growing up. I have my eldest son has MBA and PhD from Arizona State. I have one of my sons is an attorney in Oakland. All five of my children between two marriages. I always make that point because 5 kids in modern days seems to be a lot, but all had the opportunity to go to college and have a degree of some kind. So my grandmother used to say, you don't reach adulthood until you're 51. So I guess I was a child for a long time, but I got married at 18, and I remember my dad saying, he didn't say don't get married. He said, why don't you have a long engagement? And you don't recognize what that means until you're much older. And of course, by then, when you start listening, it's too late. But I think I had dropped out of college and was working at a private club as a waiter. And I was carrying 18 hours a semester. And I went to school, went to Arizona State, summer and winter. So I think at that point, I decided that I was an adult. I had a wife, 2 kids, and 2 jobs. 1949 to 53. I felt special. My 6th grade teacher wanted to skip me from 6th grade to 8th grade, and my dad said no. And my 7th grade teacher wanted to skip me from 7th grade to high school, and my dad said no. As a freshman here, I took some classes with juniors and seniors, so that was, I think I was 13 as a freshman, and so I was in class with some 17, 18-year-olds, and that was an experience. But the football team, there were no freshman teams or anything like that. Everybody was in together. And so in that experience, I was also interacting with juniors and seniors. They didn't separate you with your size. Now they divide kids by size and age and all of that. That did not happen at Carver. You had to be in with the juniors and seniors. So I had juniors and seniors that were friends of mine because of the team, because of the band. I think my sophomore year, the band, we played at the state fair, and we got back late. The bus was late, and the football bus had to wait. We were going to play Parker, Arizona, I think. And so after that, the coach and the band director decided you couldn't do both. And that was kind of a disappointment. There were 2 upperclassmen. I think I was a sophomore. So 3 of us quit the band and stayed with football. And one of the advantages of going to a small high school like this was the opportunity to participate in multiple activities. You know, the band, football, drama club. You could have a variety of experiences that at a large high school you could not do because of the numbers and because of the competition for getting into those activities. So that was, I thought, an advantage, and really disappointed that we left the band and we didn't, in order to play football. And as I think back, we could have probably played in band second semester or something, but we didn't think of it at that time. Oh, I'm not remembering that too well. I know that in my graduating class, there were 54 of us. A few of us are still living and keep in touch with each other. I think that was another advantage of the school. You developed a bond. If I go and there were people here that I probably did not know or did not know their name, but if I run into them in the community now and they went to Carver, then there's an immediate connection that we have with each other. Some of us grew up together in the communities, and I was just thinking the other day, I had a friend that was in 5th grade with me. We lived on the west side for that year. Then we moved back to the east side, but he was also in my class here at Carver. And when he was in his last days, he was in the hospital, and I called his brother to see if I could visit with him. And he said, of course, but he won't know who you are. He's not remembering. And when I got to the hospital, the brother was there, and my friend immediately called out my name as I stepped into the room and started talking about something we did when we were 9 years old. And his brother said, now he can't remember what he had for breakfast this morning or anything that happened, but he remembers what you all did at 9 years old. And I think that's the kind of connection that we made back in those days. Your circle of friends was such that, you know, you generally married a girl from Carver. Your friends primarily were from Carver, and not only were they classmates, but they were neighbors in the neighborhood because the segregated housing. So I don't think we thought about it much back then. That was the nature of the society, and that was what we grew up with. And so you were just going to school. I don't think I realized the difference until I became an educator and looked at society years later. But when we were here as students, we were high school students doing things kids do. And I don't imagine the experiences we had in high school were much different than anybody else would have in high school. So maybe we didn't think about it then, but we reflect on it as adults and the nature of society and the things that are going on. But back then, we were just kids having fun. All of my family, my uncles, my parents, my siblings. I think my sister, when the school closed, was a sophomore, so she ended up graduating from South Mountain High, which was then a new school. But before my sister, all of us graduated from Carver. I talk every week with guys that were on the football team. I think there are 5 of us left now. I talk to several classmates, female. One lady lives in Goodyear. She lived in Seattle for maybe 45 years before moving back. I talked to a classmate and her husband in Missouri. We went to elementary and high school together. Several female classmates. One lives in Gilbert. I talk to her on an ongoing basis. A couple in Chandler. I started a few years ago seeking out those classmates and friends because of our age. Sometimes people in their 80s, they don't have a lot of interaction with others. Their children may be living in another state. So as kind of a ministry, I started calling friends just to chat, and it kind of brightens their day. And so I do that on a regular basis. I have one friend. He lived in Los Angeles maybe for 50 years. He lives in Sun City now, but his wife cannot believe that we met in kindergarten at age 4, and we're still friends. So there's a lot of interaction. I talked to a couple of guys that were neighbors. We played ball in the street or played under the street lights, and most of my friends are from, I'm 87. A couple of my friends are 90, but there's still a few. I talked to one guy in Tempe. He did not go to Carver. He was younger, but we lived in the same, about a block from each other when we were about 10 years old. And a plane crashed at 16th Street in Adams. And we were out shooting marbles when that happened. So, we heard the crash and took out about 4 houses. And he kind of teases that we're probably the only 2 people in Phoenix that still remember that plane going down. So you make lifelong connections. And because of segregation, most of us were neighbors in elementary school together and in high school together. I have some people that they're deceased now, but we went all the way from kindergarten through ASU together. I was fortunate that I come from a family of achievers. So my uncles and aunts and grandparents, my dad and mom were my primary folks, but there were teachers here at Carver that I was close to. Mr. Shaw, the football coach, and Dean of Boys. Mr. Jordan, who was science teacher, Mr. Atkins, a lot of these folks. And then when I was growing up, there were people in the community that you looked up to. And like I said, everyone had a hand in your development, neighbors. And I remember one case in particular. There was this gentleman, I didn't know his name at the time. He lived in the middle of our block. And he would go out on Friday nights and come home, early mornings. And he would speak when he walked by, and we were, of course, very respectful. And I remember my brother and I and some friends were downtown, and we were kind of getting into a little tiff with some other guys. And this man was downtown, and he said, "You guys get on home, and I'll talk to your mom when I come." Well, today, kids might react differently, but we said, yes, we'll go home, and we did. And I remember he came and stopped and talked to my mom. And years later, I was teaching, and I was driving, and I saw this gentleman walking, and I said, "He looks familiar." And then it dawned on me it was this person that I just mentioned. So I drove around the block and stopped and got out of the car and spoke to him. I said, "You don't remember me?" He said, "Yes, I do." He called my name and all my brothers and sisters' name. So back then, anyone in the community, any adult could discipline you, where today you might have more trouble than it's worth, really. I don't think it was different than any other schools, except that this school, for example, started a lot of the equipment and books and other supplies were hand-me-downs from Phoenix Union, which was a large high school then. So their discards became what we had at Carver. When I was a freshman, the helmets that we wore were hand-me-downs from Phoenix Union. They had them in a big bag, and they dumped them before practice. Then you had to take time to find a helmet that fit you. And I remember one year we all had kind of a bruise on our cheek from ill-fitting helmets. And I think it was my sophomore year that we all got our own helmet that fit, and we got new uniforms. Before that, the equipment manager would hand you a jersey. You might have number 1 on it this week, and next week, number 64 on it. Well, we got our own numbers. We wore the same. We got the jerseys assigned, the equipment that fit. Carver dropped football for about 6 years back from 1941 until 1947, I believe, because of the equipment. My dad broke his collarbone because of ill-fitting equipment. And then they had another player in 1941 break his collarbone. And so they dropped football for 6 years before restarting. Mr. Robinson, the last principal that the school had, and Mr. Shaw, the Dean of Boys and Athletic Director, insisted that our equipment, and we got everything everybody else got. I enjoyed class. I guess my favorite class was English. We had some outstanding English teachers. One of our English teachers had studied in England, and we did Shakespearean plays, We did a play on Johann Strauss, the composer. We did several radio productions. So I guess speech and English were my favorite activities, although I did well in biology, enough that I was confident in college that I could take a biology class and know that I was going to do well. So in watching my grade point average, if I needed a high grade, I'd take a science class. I did well in physics and chemistry. I did well in math. I had a situation in college. I was working, I was married, and I took a math class, and I was making an A, and there was a young man from Mesa in the same situation. We didn't have, both of us were working, both of us had families. We didn't have money to buy a textbook. So we were making A's in the class, but we didn't have a textbook. He would check out the book from the library for 2 weeks and then tell me he was taking it back, and I'd go and check it out for 2 weeks. But the math teacher asked us to stay after class one day and said, okay, which of you stole my exam? And we said, well, wait a minute, lady. What do you mean stole your exam? Well, she had noticed that we didn't have textbook, but we were making A's on the exam. And she thought we had stolen the exam. And we pointed out to her that, we're older than the rest of the students. We have families and we have to work. And so, she then loaned us a textbook for that class. It turns out that I ended up taking a graduate course from her later, and she told that story to the graduate students. It was just different. I guess a lot of people do it now, but to work and have a family and go to school is kind of a job. No, we didn't look at the movies we looked at were Westerns. We didn't go to the movies much in high school. We looked at, in elementary school, we went to the movies. They had on Saturday mornings, a series. You'd see one feature film, then you'd have a film that you'd see an episode, and then it would pick up the next week. There were a couple of theaters that we did that with, and of course, Phoenix was segregated then. I do remember there was what's the Lena Horne movie? In 1943, what was it? It was an all-black movie. It had Lena Horne and all black actors. And I remember, and the movie had been released in 43, but this was after that. And I remember you had to sit in a certain section of the balcony of the old Fox Theater, just a narrow section. And I can remember that whole balcony was empty, the white section, because it was an all-black movie and they weren't interested in seeing that. And blacks, of course, had lined up to see the movie. And that was my first experience in seeing sort of rebellion. A lot of the young black men coming home from World War II, you sat in this section, it was full, so they allowed blacks to sit on the steps next to the black section. And right next to that was the white section that was empty. And so a lot of the young veterans would just sit in the first row there next to the lot. There weren't any white people there. And I remember them being asked to leave and actually having people come and take them out of the movie, even though that was just the rule. You had to sit in that black section. And I remember that was my first taste of people rebelling. I guess, the civil rights movement, this was before then, but saying, why can't I sit here? I bought a ticket. It's empty. There are no white people around. Why can't I sit in an empty seat next to the stairs that you want me to sit on? And that had an impression on me. The commitment and dedication of the teachers and administrators, everything was memorable to me in high school. Like most folks, I enjoyed the process and the experience, and the support, the interaction with friends, the activities, the classes, the quality of the teachers. Yes, I was the second ranking officer in ROTC. Back then, if you weren't in the battalion as a regular member, if you were in the band was also the military band. So you didn't have to take the ROTC drills if you were in the band. But after we dropped the band as the three that on the football team, then we had to start with the drills. And an interesting experience, we're preparing for the military night competition between all the ROTC units. And the young man that was over the drill team was not functioning that day too well. And so one of the ROTC members, and I wish I knew who yelled it out, but one of them yelled, "Fred can drill us." And they said, "Who's Fred?" Well, I'm a new member to the battalion and coming from the band, but I had been the highest ranking officer in the junior safety patrol in elementary school. And I had drilled the team then. So this kid remembered that. And so they said, "Okay, you can drill them," but I was a private. And they said, "Well, you have to be an officer to drill the team." So I got promoted to second lieutenant. And then after that, I got regular promotions. But that was how I ended up an officer in ROTC. I did not see Mr. Robinson after graduation, but he did call me when I was a student at Phoenix College. And I think I made a low grade in accounting or something, and he called to see what was going on. And I gave him a flippant answer that has haunted me to this day. I just wish Mr. Robinson were around where I could apologize for that. But he was just a very kind, scholarly, intelligent man. And even in discipline situations, it was not punishment. It was an intellectual conversation and appeal to your intellect. And I still regret that. I understand he passed away in about 1982. It's too bad that you don't start maturing until you're older, and you say some things and you should not say, and you don't realize it until later. But yes. No, I really don't. I still have it. I have a copy of it at home somewhere, but both of my, I did the 8th grade graduation speech as well. Both of them related to sports and society. Yes, especially the high school. It was in the stadium, and it seemed like those lights in the stadium, even though I had been in that stadium for ROTC and football for years, it seemed like the lights were especially hot that night. When I was growing up, my mother was a voracious reader. She read everything. We had several newspapers delivered to the house, Reader's Digest. Even though she was not a high school graduate, she just read everything, and she thought that was the basis for success in any field. And so we had to go to the library on weekends, and we had to read and discuss what we read with her. And so I think I always told my kids command of the language is important, and that reading is the basis for everything that we do, every field. And so if you can communicate well and you can read, you can handle any subject. Science, anything, there's a reading basis for it to understand. And so I always impressed on my children to be able to communicate with others, and that if you can handle the language, you can learn anything. One particular thing stands out. There was a Newberry's department store on the corner in Phoenix. I think it was First Avenue, maybe. And there was a bus stop right in front. And if you came from South Phoenix or the east side going to the west side, that's where you transferred the bus. You ride downtown, then the next bus you get on to go to the west side. And I was dating a girl on the west side, so I had to come downtown Phoenix and then transfer. And Newberry's had a display in their window, National Cotton Month, and they had these black-faced figurines picking cotton in the window. And there were always several people at that bus stop. And of course, it caused quite a consternation among us black students that had used that bus stop during that weekend. So Monday we came to school, and a group of us commented on it, and we decided we would go to Mr. Robinson, the principal, and suggest to him that he ought to call and tell them to take that out of that window because it was offensive to us. And his response was, no, I will let you leave school and you go down and tell him to take it out of the window. And then he told us how to present ourselves and that we didn't have to yell, we didn't have to be belligerent, but that to explain to the manager of the store how that display impacted us and how we didn't think it was appropriate to be there. So a group of us seniors went down and we asked to see the manager. He did see us. We explained to him why we found that display offensive, and he apologized and said that they did not want to cause that kind of response, and he called employees and walked down to the display window and had them remove it in our presence. And then we came back to school and reported that to Mr. Robinson. But I've always remembered that you know, you don't always have to stand outside and throw bricks. You can negotiate some change on occasion. Well, I grew up in segregated Phoenix. I mean, the housing was segregated. The public accommodations were segregated. It was a segregated city. And I think segregation in Phoenix had the same effect that it did the rest of the country. And even though we characterize it as like an oasis of freedom in the desert or something, it was still racial segregation and still a racist community. And that's one of the things I'm covering in my book, that however you paint it today, however you whitewash it today, or you erase it today, it was still segregation, just as there was segregation in the South. Maybe you had less chance of being lynched in Phoenix, and maybe because of the small Black population, the majority population didn't see it as a threat. So we didn't have some of the incidences that other states had, but it was still racial segregation, and it was still based on the same kinds of hatred that it was in other states. I think probably in looking back, and I'm sure this is true nationwide, it's the idea that, well, segregation wasn't so bad, that minority peoples were, comfortable and happy in their role, and that it wasn't as bad as, but there were still the microaggressions that we face today. There was still the same kind of negative impact, or the bombardment of the psyche, all of the things that experienced by those earlier groups still exist today. Schools were segregated by law then, and of course, Carver was closed because the law changed, the segregation was outlawed. But if we did a survey today, the schools that were segregated back then probably are still segregated today. I was superintendent of a school district in Phoenix before retirement, and 85%, 85 to 90% of most inner city schools are still racially segregated based on housing patterns and the concept of the neighborhood school. For me, it was time and money, having to work full time. I worked 7 days a week. I had a family, 2 kids at the time, and I worked at a private club. So I would, at 4:30 in the morning, go to clean at this private club, and then I would go to class at ASU. I got out of class at 2:00. I was due back at my job at 2:30, and I worked generally till 10:30 at night. On my day off, I worked 12-hour shift at the Wholesome Bakery, and one of the parts of the job was to unload the bread trucks when they came in, take the racks out. And so if the truck was late getting in, then I worked longer than 12 hours. I was an education major, and back in those days, that was the field where you were most likely to get a job. I did have friends that majored in accounting. Most did not major in business administration, but if they got a job, it would be in government, probably. Very few folks could become an accountant and then get a regular accounting job. I had one friend, his way to get through the business school was major in business education. And most of the jobs available to Black folk were in education as teachers. There was a saying, and I've read it about other universities across the country, that professors determined from the very beginning that no Black was going to get an A. My approach to that was that if I got a grade that was lower than I thought I deserved, I'd go back and say to the professor, you know, I don't think that was fair. I deserve a better grade. And generally, the response was, you'll have to take the exam again. So I would take the exam immediately. I'd say, okay, let's go now, because I felt like they really weren't going to read that second exam, but they needed an excuse to change my grade. So I would say that to professors, and in many cases, I took the exam again, and you know, they raised my grade. But I had a very low GPA at Arizona State, and probably I could have done better if I had just been a full-time student and didn't have other responsibilities. But I just sort of made up my mind that, you know, there are no comments on your degree. It just says Arizona State University and signed by the Board of Regents and the president. So I didn't worry about, you know, being a scholar too much. I just had to get out and get a job. And I also just made going to school a regular part of my routine. So I got a master's 2 years after my undergraduate. Then I was, the night that I got my undergraduate degree, they didn't have but one graduation ceremony. So I had taught a year already before my degree was conferred. And one of my uncles was in the first group of 6 people to get the doctorate in education when Arizona State started offering it. And they, of course, walked across the stage and were hooded and all of that. And I just thought, well, this is great seeing my uncle do that. So I decided, well, I can get a doctorate as well. So I immediately started on my doctorate. And it took me a long time because of working and family, but I got it. And then I immediately went into law school, and 3 years later got that. And then when I was retiring, one of the attorneys for the school district where I was superintendent suggested that I go and get a Master of Laws, which I commuted for. I was going through a divorce at that time, and so I needed something to occupy my mind. And so I commuted to Pepperdine and got a Master of Laws. And I came back and I became a mediator, contract mediator for the EEOC for a few years. And finally, I'm retired. I come from a family of teachers, and it was always stress. My grandmother, you go by to see her, are you in school? Well, no. Well, when are you going back? It was kind of expected. And education was viewed as a way to overcome the segregation and all of that. So I come from a family of teachers. I think at one time there were 9 or 10 in a couple of school districts. And I mean, my grandmother was a teacher in 1914 in Texas. Her sisters were teachers. And so education has been a part of the fabric of my life, and it was just kind of expected. We recently did a count. I think my family, and that includes some of the wives and children, of course, have a total of, I think, 40 degrees from Arizona State, and we have attended 20 other colleges and universities across the country, including Harvard, Yale, Cornell, some of the Ivy League schools. We have now, I think we have 6 attorneys, young people in the family, and we have 6 MBAs. So everyone's not getting a degree in education anymore, but that was how it was early in the family. Yeah. I have a lot of messages I'd like to share with the new generation. One of them is that the value of work. I, as a principal and superintendent in hiring teachers, they did not exhibit the kind of image that we were taught coming along. You know, I had people coming and apply for a teaching job in cutoffs and flip-flops. I mean, that's, you know, I was hired once for a job because when I went to apply for the job, I had on a blue suit and a white shirt and tie because people don't seem to think that's important anymore. People don't come to you with a resume dressed professionally. You know, they're just casual. I think younger generations, in most cases, have not learned to work. When I was coming along, everybody even students here. We had weekend jobs, summer jobs. So we learned the value of work. Younger generations don't seem to embrace common manners and courtesy. Kids will send you an invitation for the graduation. You send them a gift. You don't know if they got it or not. You never hear thank you or a note or anything. Those things that we learned to do, they don't even pick up the phones. They're so wrapped up in their phone, but they could call you and say, well, I got your gift. Thank you. So there are things like that my generation learned that they don't seem to learn today. I worked for the city of Phoenix for a number of years, and the department head was female, and she would come into the business meeting each week that we had, and I would stand up. And, why are you standing? Everyone would ask, Well, I was a woman a lady enters the room, you stand up and acknowledge that, or you pull out a chair, or you open the door. New generations don't want to be bothered with that. Young women get insulted if you open the door for them. What's wrong with you? I know how to open the door for myself. It's a different, and I think a lot of the problems we face today in this country are the lack of common courtesy and respect. And that's in government, that's at all levels. We don't seem to do that. We seem to be polarized by race because of rage, anger, that prohibits us from really thinking about our human interactions. And a lot of it is that we don't respect each other. We don't respect common courtesies. We don't view each other as human beings worthy of any kind of respect. And I think it causes me to be less optimistic about developing society. First of all, let me say, I don't think this country has developed the mental health structure that we ought to have. And I think large segments of our population have mental health issues. And I think the stresses and pressures of living in today's society are going to dictate that at some point we need to take a real hard look and make an effort to improve mental health services. I think the numbers of people that are depressed, that are stressed out, that are struggling, is overwhelming the society, and we're not doing anything about it. I think that physical health, most of us, because of the way the society is structured, the pressures we face in raising a family, working on jobs, high stress jobs, all of that require that we take a look at medical services for society. Now, I know that the Obama administration tried to do something about that. I still think we fall behind. I think the idea of affordable health care and affordable prescription and drug care, I think most of us at a certain age end up with multiple health problems, requiring multiple treatments. And most of us take, all these pills every day, and that it's very expensive. I mean, I'm a diabetic and I take insulin. At one point, that was very expensive. It has dropped recently, of course, because of the legislation, but we don't take good care of our elderly people, nor do we take advantage of what they have to offer experience-wise and intellectually. It's sort of like you get to be a certain age and you're cast aside, and somehow you lose the ability to think or to take advantage of the experience that you have in terms of contributing to society. I think that line is too defined. That I remember many years ago, the leaders of the great powers in the world were all in their 80s. All the major powerful countries, the leaders were in their 80s. And I think we ought to take advantage of the experience that people have. I remember, what president was it? But at one point, because of the crisis in, was it result of hurricane or tsunami or something, the ex-presidents were called in to form a committee to deal with that crisis. Well, if you're president, I think you ought to have an ongoing commission, that your next step after president is you go to this commission and you're already financially set, and so you give back for a few years to solving the world's major problems. Let's say if you took George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter still living, or is he passed, and Obama, and take the former presidents and put them together and have this commission that they serve on to deal with certain major problems in the world. Maybe combine them. Now, I know the United Nations is supposed to do some of that, but in terms of this society, we ought to take advantage of the experience. My major project right now is working on this book. I think I have over 200 clippings, newspaper clippings, photographs, interviews on the history, and I've gone back to 1909 when the legislation was passed to segregate the schools. And I'm telling that story all the way up to past the closing of Carver. So I will have a complete history of the people and students and the evolution of this school. It is thought that Carver played a major role in the integration of schools in Phoenix. And there was a lawsuit that was determined to officially desegregate. But the success of these athletic programs, dominance really of the athletic programs, the ROTC program, our participation in other areas sort of made it okay to integrate the school and kind of smooth the integration. When Carver students went to Phoenix Union, the National Guard was not called out as in other states. There were no crowds standing out yelling, and because the participation of Carver students and athletes at Phoenix Union, and the success that it brought, and the fact that, at least for them, integration worked. The teachers that left here were assigned to and distributed to all the other high schools. And I think at that time, the high school district, Phoenix College was a part of the high school district. Teachers went to all levels. Those Carver teachers that had been college teachers went to Phoenix College and Glendale Community College, and the teachers had success at the schools they were at. Miss Seneca, the biology teacher, I think went to South High. Mr. Jordan, the science teacher, was Arizona Teacher of the Year, I think twice, and was nominated for National Teacher of the Year. And so those folks, their background, they were able to fit into the other schools without problem. Well, I think it ought to tell the story. We ought to have at the museum the history of the school and the collateral stories, the history of the Black community. And I think it's important for all races to know their history. By knowing our history and where we came from, it gives us perspective and understanding, and it adds significance to the present. We see things now, voter suppression, some of the other things happening nationally, where you as a young person may think, oh, that's new and we got to figure out a way. But that kind of stuff's been going on for generations. We're fighting some of the same battle that were fought during the civil rights era. There are movements now, but that's not brand new. There were always movements. There was a Back to Africa movement. There was, I recently, in my research for my family history, found out that my great-granduncle started a debate society in Phoenix early on, and one of the topics that they debated was whether Blacks ought to, as a group, move en masse to Mexico and leave this country. So the problems are not new, and the discussion and those things that we do to overcome them are not new, and they remain issues today. Some of the things that majority America is trying to do were done years ago, and so if we understand that past and we're able to see more clearly what's going on presently, and maybe determine how we overcome some of those things, or we understand to the extent that we don't let those things happen because we know the results. So I think it's important that we all know where we came from.